Welcome back to the main stage. Today is all about municipal transport. How has the conference been for you guys so far? Have you been enjoying it? Yes, that's what we want to hear. At least 5 people said they are enjoying it. I love it. It's Friday, it's early, we're all still waking up, but you'll want to be awake for this next panel because the topic is so key. If you're joining us on the live stream, we're really happy to have you. A warm welcome to you. This next panel is about the road towards zero emissions urban mobility. It is moderated by Nadja Gläser of BCG. I'd like to welcome Nadja and all of her panelists to the main stage.
Excellent. Yes, welcome to our panel, The Road Towards Zero Emission Urban Mobility. My name is Nadja Gläser. I'm an urban planner. I'm working as a project leader at BCG and working on e-mobility concepts for over a decade now. Very happy to moderate this panel today and hope you guys have a great time with us. Let me just introduce our awesome panel to you and start on the right-hand side with Gerd Schneider. He's the CEO of Volvo buses for Germany and Switzerland, and he has an economic background, and for 20 years he was working with Voith at Turbo, and there he was senior vice president and overlooking the global key accounts, and he is with Volvo for more than 2 years now. And we also have Jan Lüdtke right next to him. Jan, he is a head of strategic partnerships at VIA, which is an on-demand mobility and pre-scheduled transit provider, and he has a background in economics and marketing. And before joining VIA, he was with Movit and also with digital agencies and working on campaigns for the automotive industry, for instance, BMW and Audi. Welcome, Jan. Right in the middle, we have Dr. Tina Wagner. She is from the city of Hamburg, and she is head of division for transport development. And she has a PhD in transportation planning and a background also in environmental management, so key to this topic. And before joining the city, she was working as a researcher at the Technical University of Hamburg. Welcome, Tina. And last but not least, there is Matthias Prim. He is from PTV. PTV is a mobility and transportation planning software provider, and he is a product manager for the traffic simulation system WISM. And he also has a PhD in engineering and a background in industrial engineering, and has been working for the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology for quite some time as a researcher and also as a coordinator of research groups. And yes, let us start with that nice slide over there to illustrate to you the importance and the urgency of zero-emission urban mobility. And I brought to you 3 numbers: the national number, the global number, the national number, and also the local number, and to illustrate you what's ahead of us. So the first number is 20%. The 100 cities with the biggest CO2 footprint are responsible for 20% of the global CO2 emissions. Also, 2 of these cities are Cologne and Berlin, not Hamburg, so that's, that's fine. But what does that mean? So that shows us that, energy, transportation and buildings, which are the main governments and also industry, can change and can transform. It's not only focusing on individual consumer behavior. So this is something that we can work on and that we can discuss later on. And then the second number is minus 50%. So we have to reduce CO2 emission in the German transportation sector about half. So the German Federal Agency for the Environment says that we need to reduce it up to 85 million tons of CO2 equivalents until 2030, and now we are almost double, so that is a huge challenge, and we really need to work on that. And last but not least, at the same time, even though we need to reduce it by so much, we see that there will be an increase in miles traveled in urban areas, so on the local level, by 16% in 2030. This is a number from the German Research Institute for Economic Research. So This is quite challenging. What does it mean? So first of all, it means that when we reduce emissions in urban areas, it has an impact, so that is hopeful. Second of all, there are goals, so it's a good thing. We set the goals and we monitor them, and there are institutes that do that, so it's a good thing. But at the same time, on the local level, we really need to work on the implementation, so we need to take measures. And this is something where we would like to start the discussion now. When we look at the situation today, what are the major challenges that municipal transport is facing today? And I would like to start with the city representative, with Tina, and maybe you can give us a view on that. What are the main challenges today?
Yeah, thank you, Nadja, and welcome to the panel today. I think the biggest challenge of all is that we have to become quicker in everything we do, basically. To give you an idea, in Hamburg we strive for a mode shift to public transport, cycling and walking. The very ambitious aim is 80% mode share for public transport, walking and cycling in 2030, coming from 64% share in 2017. So that's quite a shift, really. And why do we do this? It's basically because we are growing as a city. Hamburg is building 10,000 new dwellings, like flats and houses every year. So the mobility demand is also rising, and we have limited space for traffic, limited road space. And therefore we need to support the modes that are space efficient, kind of, and these are public transport, walking and cycling. And they are not only more space efficient than the private car, but they are also more energy efficient, and that's very important because every kilometer not traveled by car saves CO2, obviously, and that's very important for us. Yeah, so it's in the space, really. It's more space efficient, it's more energy efficient, and it also makes our cities healthier, greener, and less noisy. And we implement certain or a lot of measures, actually, to really increase the frequency of services in public transport, of buses, light rails, and rail lines. We also work on further automatization so that we can really increase the frequency quite a lot. We also work on extending our big rail system, our main station, for example, in Hamburg, which is a very crucial node, really, in the transport system of Hamburg. And also we work on extending on-demand systems. So we work together with Moja, for example, and Yuki. And our goal is that in 2030, each person that lives in Hamburg will reach public transport or on-demand systems within 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes frequency. And maybe the last point we focus on is redesigning streets and building infrastructure for cycling and buses. We put more effort in, for example, redesigning the streets in our inner city. So we take car traffic out of some streets and basically change them into more space for buses, for cycling, and so on. For example, I don't know if someone knows our Hamburg a bit, our Jungfernstieg, close to the Binnenalster, was made car-free 2 years ago, and before that we had about 20,000 cars on it, and now it's only possible to go there by bike, by bus, and by taxi, and also delivery vehicles are allowed in certain time frames.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds good. So you also mentioned on-demand system to support the public transportation system.
Exactly. Yeah.
So maybe Jan, you can, from your perspective, comment on that and tell us what, from your perspective, the biggest challenges are.
And thanks again for having me too. I think the biggest challenge is implementation. I think the technology is there, right? A lot of the solutions are there. And we just need to be a little bit faster and a little bit more ambitious in implementing them. And I think that's true for the technology side, so what we offer on-demand systems that we deal in, but it's also true for infrastructure that's needed to really be able to deploy large EV fleets. It's true for a lot of the planning software that can go into really kind of rethinking how we use roads, how we plan our transit network, etc. And it needs some kind of bold action, both on the legislative and city side, and on the private side too. I think there's a lot of benefit in the collaboration between both. And in some cases, there's still technological challenges. So, we very personally, when we have services that we launch, a lot of times there's a lot of accessibility requirements, right? You need wheelchair accessible vehicles. At the same time, the fleet should be fully electric. I'm curious to see the cars here, but that's a challenge that we've had in the past, finding fully electric, fully wheelchair accessible vehicles. So there's some technology challenges still in the way, but I think largely it's the implementation piece. We just need to put some money behind it and some willingness on the legislative side to move fast. So I'm always happy when I hear things like in Hamburg where the cities are implementing the right things.
So when we talk about the implementation, it always helps to have milestones. So maybe Matthias, when it comes to the most important milestones, what do you think? What are those?
I think the first thing that comes into your mind when we talk about zero emission is probably transition to electric mobility. So I started researching in that field over a decade ago, and I'm really happy to see how finally the markets are taking off. And we all heard the big announcement of the European Union, after 2035 only zero emission. And I think the manufacturers are even more ambitious. So many of them will drop combustion engines by 2030. Of course, the new fleet needs a new infrastructure, so ramping up the electric charging infrastructure right now is also a very big task. You could set diverse milestones on this development. But I think we also need a more holistic perspective. So just changing the propulsion technology in the cars or in the buses does not really change the system. So we need an overall approach. And I think the main challenge is that for decades we have been building our cities in a very car-centric way. So lots of funding, lots of space has been dedicated to the cars. And of course the cities are built like this. And right now we need to ramp up the transition towards a more holistic approach and maybe get from a car-centric towards a people-centric approach. So foster active mobility solutions, cycling, the pedestrians need to have their space. We need to bring more quality, more livable cities. We need to have a nice environment. We need to have short paths, and this transition is probably the biggest milestone, that we set new targets to put the people in the center and make a very good overall mobility offer. And then it should be able that people pick from a variety of possible solutions, the one that really fits the mobility demand for this purpose. So I don't believe that there's a general one-size-fits-all solution, but we should rather go to fit-for-purpose designs. And if we have a holistic offer, if we have a holistic system, we can reach a lot. And fit-for-purpose is also a thing, or demand-based dimensioning. Not every city is the same, so we can't apply the same milestones and the same development for every city. We need to take into account the local dependencies that are there, and specific solutions for specific cities.
Okay, thank you. So when it comes to what Matthias just said, Gerd, as a representative of a bus manufacturer, how do you see, what is your view on that topic?
Well, I think we as a bus manufacturer, we had since long time our vision to electrify public transit in cities. The technology is there in the buses. We also see that the infrastructure in the cities can be built up to charge those buses. Is also a very important thing, but everything is important. Also what Tina said, the mode shift, bringing the individual traffic out of the city and have a great offering, attractive offering of public transit. You just said increased tech time, every 5 minutes a bus. You also need to be able to access public transit, let's say, within 100 meters in walking distance. So I think there are many, many things that are already on their way. Cities and their suburban areas, I would say, is the perfect cell to start zero emission in this area, but we also have to think about a smart way, how do we bring it further into the rural areas to connect from the outside into the city with zero emission and public transit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tina, what is your perspective on that?
Well, I think electrification, of course, is key. And as a city, we can work on several levels. For like the most important is electrifying our own fleets and the fleets of our public transport operators. Our Hochbahn and VHH, which are the biggest transport operators in Hamburg, they have over 200 electrified buses up to now. And this is 12%, and in the next years we want to change it to 100%, of course. Some of the buses are also from you, Gerd, and so that's the first thing. I just want to mention that beside the buses being electrified, we already have, of course, all the light trains and trains being electrified mobility, which is basically our backbone of public transport. We also work together with the car sharing providers in order to get them to make their fleets electric fleets. They are already at 50% today, and we cooperate with them and negotiated that they are going to aim at 80% in in 1 or 1.5 years. So and we put in some more charging infrastructure in the public space. Therefore, at the moment we have 1,300 charging spots in Hamburg in the public space. That will be increased to 2,000 spots until 2025, and also we expect that within the private space that is accessible to public, for example, like supermarkets, the parking of supermarkets, and the petrol stations and so on, that the number of charging points increases as well a lot, and also that in the private space, at companies, at home, most of the charging processes will happen in the future. Yeah, and then the electrification of delivery vehicles, also a very important point, I think. Also here we work together with some of the courier services, and then we also basically estimate that in order to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, we need to have about 40 to 50% share of electric cars in 2030, and ideally also 25% of trucks being electrified by 2030. So yeah, that's basically the goals we are aiming at in Hamburg.
Okay, so we now talked a lot about the goals, and we talked about the new offering, new services, and also electrifying the service. But let's talk about what needs to change when it comes to mobility behavior, because in the end, we are offering service for people, and people need to use it. So maybe Jan, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, sure. I'm lucky that I have 2 sons, so I think about how to change behavior quite a bit. I think in the end, it's a little bit of a carrot and stick approach, right, that we need, and that is true here too, where we probably have to put rules in place that are a little bit of a stick when it comes to making the individual private car a little bit less convenient to drive as cheaply as you can do it right now in cities, right? So the example with the Jungfernstieg or so is a good one. So cities need to, put measures in place, whether it's higher parking, et cetera. But it's kind of mind-blowing how cheap it still is to drive a combustion engine vehicle in a city and park it everywhere, et cetera. So I think that's one side of it. But when you do that, you kind of need to offer the alternative. And I think that's where all these new services and modes come in, that you do need the carrot. You need to offer an alternative to the private car then. And even in cities that have great public transport networks today, there's a pretty large portion of the population that still decides not to take it, right? And there's a reason for it, whether this is, I don't know, cost, perceived security, convenience, whatever, right? And we may personally not agree with it, but they're still driving their own car. And so we need to recognize that and then offer alternatives that are closer to the experience of driving their own car, which I think, again, we can do with the services and technology that we have available today. Not just on-demand services, but they're part of that, they're one puzzle piece, I guess, in this. So that we, in this, I think Oliver Wolf mentioned it earlier, right, this like multimodal environment, we can actually have a pretty decent alternative for all kinds of use cases and needs that I have, where I can live without a car. In Berlin, I managed to live for quite some time with 2 kids and without a car, and that's, that wouldn't have been possible without all these different modes being around. So I think that's the kind of carrot side of the equation that we need to put in place.
Mm-hmm. And if what we just mentioned, the private car was always a very comfortable mode of transport, and now listening to you, that it needs to be as comfortable as a private car when we talk about new services. What does that mean for the vehicle? So we have with Gerd someone who's from the industry sector and producing buses. What does that mean for you as a bus manufacturer?
Well, I think as a bus manufacturer, we are working constantly to improve first of all the appearance of a bus, not just the outside, but more important is the inside for the passengers. We just made a new inside layout, in fact, in Hamburg with VHH in the area of an articulated bus in the back, to have a very convenient area also for older people, for younger people, bigger people, and I think this needs to be done. And also in this vehicle, we have a special light concept so that you feel really in a nice ambiente when you travel the bus, so it's cool to be in a bus. That must be the target. And then further thinkings are also how can you work on smell, like what you smell. This makes an impact to your mindset. Is this was this a good trip? So we're thinking of this. Of course, electrification again brings a big plus because it's silent. There's not a lot of noise, not in the inside, but also not on the outside. You can even access into buildings and not even outside buildings. So we could be picked up by electric bus here when we go to the next hall or whatever. So I think there's lots of opportunities for us to make it very attractive to step into a bus.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now talking about electric vehicles, like private cars, you have been doing a lot of research on e-mobility. What do you think are the key points when it comes to electrifying also individual transport, but also then public transport? And what do they need in order to feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Because I actually researched on what people actually need, also in contrast to what they think they need, and this is kind of a problem. I would say we are all spoiled. We've had it all for such a long time, and we didn't feel the pain we were creating by our way of moving around because it was externalized. So CO2 emissions don't cause me any pain right now, but they cause pain to the planet, and we somehow need to internalize those external costs we are creating. But in terms of what people actually need, I think they just pick the easy or the perceived easy and comfortable way to get quickly from A to B. And this is exactly what we should focus on. So in stable boundary conditions, mobility behavior is also quite stable. We have lots of studies about that. We have lots of data. So if we don't change it, and you could say carrot and stick approach, or you could say push and pull, mobility behavior won't change so much. We can keep talking for quite a while. So we need to work on the boundary conditions, and cycling is a very good example. We see it in Karlsruhe, for example. We see it in many other cities. Space is limited in the city, so to get a big bicycle lane, you often have to take one away from the cars. And of course, at the beginning, that's a very tough decision, and everyone will hate you for doing that. But after quite some time, when people think, oh, this is a very nice new mode that is somehow convenient and comfortable, and somehow it feels better, and the other feels a little bit worse, so then the easiest alternative is suddenly cycling. And we see that in the Netherlands or in Denmark, for example, they've been front runners. They've been building great cycling infrastructure in the cities and also in the country for decades, and it led to a society where it's completely normal that this is maybe your number one mode of transport. And yeah, I think we also somehow set the direction for our new national cycling strategy. Last year we announced that there should at least be a funding scheme comparable to the Netherlands or Denmark in terms of money, but before that we had just too little budget and too little effort. So we need to work on the boundary conditions, and then behavior will change. Always towards the direction of my perceived comfortable and quick number one alternative to get through the city.
Let me just ask you about that. So when it comes to operating an operating model in the city for that, what does a city need to do in order to reach that point? Do they need to implement pilot projects, or how can they show the people that it's a good way of moving around?
Yeah, I think pilot project is one really good approach, because they create some awareness, they create interest, but the other thing is also the system understanding. So mobility is not you get in your car and you drive where you want. It's a really complex system. You have so many different modes, and you have so many possibilities how to shape your offer that it's easy to lose the overview. So this is also where our technology, our products come into play. Simulation can help you a lot to get transparency about the mobility demand of your population and how it would react and could be served by different alternatives. And I think the first step for cities is really to get back into the driver's seat again and get an overview of the situation. We all saw it with the introduction of those electric scooters some years ago. Cities somehow felt to me like the victims of that development. It came so sudden, and they didn't know how to react. The processes were slow, and in some cities you couldn't even walk anymore because scooters everywhere. So you need to take the control. You need to make a framework. You need to set the boundary conditions where all those different modes can be embraced, can be integrated, but in a good way and not in a way that messes up the system.
Yeah. Tina, you were laughing, and let me just take one of the sentences. So cities need to be in the driver's seat again. Maybe you can comment on that and your perspective, maybe from Hamburg, but maybe also from what you see in other cities. I think that would be good.
Yeah, well, I think that's quite true. Although I also think that we need all sectors to solve the challenge of today, to cut down on CO2 and to make mobility more sustainable and have a really profound mode shift. But yeah, of course, the cities play a very important role, and we basically define what kind of public transport we want to offer. We set access regulation, we set and define parking regulations and management, speed regulations, for example. So we are in the driver's seat. I totally agree. But we need the industry also to bring in the vehicles, to bring in the services, to bring in the software also the apps we need to offer seamless transportation. So everyone is needed, basically, and everyone should work on this mutual aim. Your example with the scooters was a quite good one, because we have a federal legislation for, or it's called the Act for Small Electric Vehicles, something like that, if you translate it. It's got a ugly name, really. It doesn't give us much regulative instruments as a city. It just basically assumes that an e-scooter is like a bike. You can park it everywhere. Of course, you have to care for, that there's still enough space for people to walk around, but that's it. And based on this framework, it's been very hard for the cities to kind of manage the e-scooters and how they are really parked. And here, for example, in Hamburg, we also work together with the e-scooter providers on different measures that actually improve the situation. We have no parking zones, for example. We have agreed on there are really people who go around and check how the scooters are parked. The scooter drivers have to take a picture of where they put the scooter and send it to the operators, and so on and so on. So it's a very difficult process on improving the situations, but I think everyone also sees that the situation needs to be improved. So I think I have the feeling that the operators are also quite cooperative. I mean, it's sometimes a bit difficult if the measures we want them to be taken are cost extensive. So then we have to negotiate who's paying for what. And some costs we actually do have as a city as well. Because we pay our Stadtreinigung now to actually also go around and look after scooters being placed wrongly, and but that's a perfect example for that there is a regulated framework, and we as a city need to kind of act within this framework, and we really have to work on these frameworks as well. So, I mean, they are going to be developed as well. Like, for example, last year we had the development of the Public Transport Act, the Personenbeförderungsgesetz, and that was also a very good step, I think, for us, because we can, now have other forms of public transport and on-demand transport being defined and tendered, and so we basically go from changing the frameworks, implementing new measures, and I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah. So you agree that the transformation needs to be led by the cities, as I understand now. Gerd, maybe you can comment on that. What role do you see for the industry, and how can you cooperate, collaborate? I was looking for that one. Collaborate with cities in the future.
Well, first of all, I mean, we will provide the vehicles necessary to make this transformation. Zero emission, of course, is key. We will develop this further. We are working on increasing range, reducing electric consumption. So we have everything in place to make public transit. I think another key is to reduce the individual traffic, to make more room for public transit, because if we just transform the propulsion technology from combustion to zero emission with the vehicle park we have here today, I think we'll have not won anything in CO2 reduction, because we can't even make so much green energy to fuel the cars and whatever. So I think there we need to work together to reduce individual traffic. And just to create a bit of a burning platform, I listened to to our Federal Agency of Statistics. They just announced that the passenger car density has increased dramatically in the last year. So this is totally the wrong direction we need. So you mentioned in the beginning, we need to be fast. Speed is of the essence. And I think the easiest and fastest way of implementing zero emission public transit is the bus. Because you, of course, you need charging infrastructure, but you do not need to build a rail track or whatever. So I think the bus delivers a lot of opportunities to make this change fast. Yeah, we are there. We are prepared. We will be delighted to send you more buses, Tina, and I'm sure our competitors as well. So everything is there.
I totally get that you promote the bus, but what you said is also a big point in the discussion when it comes to transformation of mobility. And maybe Jan, maybe you can comment on that. He just said we need car-free in a city, so we need to reduce the individual transport in urban areas. What is your view on that?
I tend to agree. I like riding a bike, so I'm all for having car-free cities. In a way, I think it's a little bit what was said earlier, right? You need a mode of transport for whatever use case you have. Even in the car-free streets, you may still want to allow electric delivery vehicles during certain time frames, or there are populations that can't ride a bike, and you want to offer transport to them too. So. But in general, yeah, I think that's part of the approach that we should take. I think it's, the title of the discussion is reducing the emissions, and you could do that by just reducing transport in general or traffic in general. I think that would be the wrong approach, right? So I think we shouldn't forget that in general, it's good if people take more trips. Like, it's good for access to jobs, it's good for equitable participation in the society, etc. And that makes me quite bullish on these future transport systems too, because I think we do have the chance to have systems that are more sustainable and have less emission vehicles, etc. But also actually create more mobility and create a more equitable and accessible mobility, right? Allow people that currently cannot or don't want to be mobile, be more mobile, and that's a good thing, right? So. When I see like increased in trips, I don't actually look at that badly, as long as the trips are, done in a good manner by bike or by an electric vehicle or in a shared carpool, on-demand vehicle or whatever. I think more trips are generally good, and so I'm looking forward to. Maybe my kids will never have a driver's license, and it's kind of a cool thought. If there's a equitable and electric system for them to use, so
yeah. Well. I like that we all agree here, but to be honest, what we can see all over the place in all big German cities, it's a political question. And for instance, we just heard in Düsseldorf with a comparatively new mayor who wanted to transform the transportation system and make it more sustainable, that they now are stepping back a little bit because they see that it's not something that the voters are keen to do. So I think this is something that we really need to talk about. How can we have a better offering, and how can we also communicate in a way that people actually like that idea of more cycling? And maybe you just nodded a lot, Tina. Maybe you can comment on that.
Well, I think that's very important. It's because we can't subscribe to people what mode they are choosing, but it should be if if it's so flexible in the future that you have different options and you don't need to care about your car if you live in a city, because you don't have to bring it to the inspection, you don't have to change the tires when wintertime comes. You just have, your car sharing option, and they do it for you, and you take the car, whatever you need at the moment, be it a big family car or a smaller city car or a van or whatever. So I think if we make it if we reach a system that offers lots of flexibility and also kind of a new form of freedom of mobility, then I think we will be there. And I mean, it's already now, it's the case in the bigger inner cities, because in Berlin or in Hamburg or in Munich, if you live in the inner city, you really don't need to have an own car. And for many people, it's just the last mobility insurance, I would say. And I also lived in Hamburg for 20 years with 2 kids, daughters, without a car, and I think it's perfect. Yeah. It works well, and of course, if you live more in the suburbs, it's a bit more difficult. I think that's probably the crucial areas for the next years we have to really tackle, because there aren't so many options, like all the sharing options and also the on-demand options. They usually don't go to the city borders, but and we have to work on extending them. And then I think we also will be able to really reach the people and make them feel that the alternatives are a good option.
Okay. So talking about reaching the people, I think digitalization can also play a role in that. So maybe, I think, Jan, you wanted to say something, maybe then Matthias, what is your view on that?
I wanted to comment, because you're right, like we're spoiled if we live in like one of these big city centers, that you have all these options, and that's not necessarily true outside. So, but again, to the earlier point, I think the technology is there. Like, you could deploy them there, right? You can't necessarily just wait for the private companies to do it, because they're not incentivized to do so often, but you could solve it, right? And you could, in the whole debate right now about the €9 ticket, etc., it is frustrating if you live in a rural area and you can't use it because there is nothing to take, right? And so you can solve this. Like you can, if you're fast in the implementation, kind of coming back to the first question, there's good options available. So I'm, again, pretty positive, but we need to kind of move fast, and we need to move together with the cities and legislation on it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I think digitization is a great keyword, of course, and we are associated with data and big data naturally. And I think that's really key, to make use of that data. We have so much data available. We have so many intelligent systems that create data about our mobility, but I don't feel that we are leveraging them enough to really make use in favor of the people who are mobile and who want to have the best option. And we always hear claims like data is the new oil. And I really like that one, because on the one hand it shows the power, it shows the potential for the industry, it shows the value, but on the other hand it also shows the problems. We all know the pictures of some oil spill with that crude oil messing up the beaches or the animals or whatsoever, and it can happen the same with data. You are knee deep in your data swamp and you get stuck and you don't know how to make use of it. So the biggest part in big data is making use of data, and you need the refinery to make products out of the data, to bring the right quality of data for the right purpose. So it's extremely important that we have initiatives like Mobility Data Space, for example, from the federal government, that helps to make high-value data available for others, that helps to share data. And for example, we as PTV, we are making use of the availability of data by automating the process of creating transport models. So we just launched a new service called a PTV Model to Go. Usually it took at least a month to build up a transport model, but you want that kind of model to make good decisions, to make use of all the data available. And by this highly automated process, by using available data for free or commercially available data, we brought that down to days or weeks. And now we can have model-based decisions in much more application fields. So that is a help.
Okay. That sounds amazing. Good. So last comment from Tina.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe a last remark on digitization. We think there's really great potential in self-driving on-demand shuttles. And we are looking forward that maybe in the next years we will really see such fleets in the cities, because I think then, public on-demand transport will be able also to go to the suburbs. And so I'm very keen on the development of these sort of shuttles, self-driving, and hopefully we will manage that. That would be great.
That's a very nice vision. So yes, thank you for your comments in the discussion. Maybe just let me quickly summarize what I took away from this discussion. So we said that the technology is there, we have innovative products, but we need to bring them in place soon, and this will only work if we push and pull. So it needs to be a very good offering, but we need to also push into the right direction, and parts of it might be a car-free city. So this is something that we should work on when it comes to offering comfortable alternatives to the people. I think this is very important. So reaching the people is also key, not only on the political level, but also offering digital tools to communicate alternatives, to communicate sustainable modes of transport. And last but not least, you all said we need to collaborate. So the public sector, both federal level but also local level, needs to collaborate with the industry and the mobility service providers, and we should really continue doing this. So thank you very much for the discussion. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day at the IAA. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you very much to our panelists, Gerd, Tina, Matthias, Jan, and Nadja, for the moderation. We really appreciate it. You are free to go, but I hope you'll stick around for our next discussion. Here on the main stage, the conversation is continuing. Let's do another quick poll. Has anyone here heard of something called the 9-Euro ticket? That is the topic of our next talk, coming up in 14 minutes. Stick around for that. If you're on the live stream, in 14 minutes, we are carrying on